Hey guys, Kendrick's here, and thank you so much for tuning into this. I want to say this right now before we get into this discussion that every single one of these discussions, I do them at the end of every season of Red vs. Blue now, the end of every volume of RWBY, and when Genlock comes out, if I do really enjoy that series, I'm going to be doing it at the end of Genlock as well. So this is really a community thing, and it's a way for you guys to really get into the discussion, which I really want you guys to show up for these, and they are limited because I can't have so many people just showing up whenever they want. But this is a fun time to review the entire volume as it is, and sort of say what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, all the ups and the downs. That's really what this is about. It's about the community opinion. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion. Okay, guys, and with me I have two friends. They are Bonnie and DTT, Dust to Dust, or as we just call him, Dust. What's up, guys?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for letting me join in the RWBY discussion.
Hi, everybody. I'm new, and thanks again, Kendricks, for reminding me.
No problem. So, straight up off the bat, I want to ask you both. Personal opinion, did you like this volume more than previous volumes?
This volume, to me, for RWBY, was actually very interesting, due to the fact that since Volume 4 was basically about healing from the wounds of what happened during Volume 3, Volume 5 is about trying to actually get up and trying to create a plan, and also seeing if they can, if they could keep on moving forward, which is really good. So I believe this was a very good volume. It's just that it's not really one of my favorites, but I still have to say it's a really good volume.
Okay, Bonnie?
Personally, for me, I did like this volume, especially since it answered a whole lot of questions for me, like John's semblance. We didn't know what it was, and it kind of gave us a backstory between Ren and I think.
Well, no, Ren's backstory was discussed in Volume 4.
Yeah, that was a Volume 4.
Yeah,
that was a Volume 4 moment right there.
Yeah, but it also kind of discussed how him and his friend kind of met. That I thought was a good point.
Again, I think that was a Volume 4 moment when Ren and Nora first met. But
yeah.
But it did go into explaining how semblance works a little bit more, and I will say I do still like this volume, but it's definitely not my favorite. I feel that the pacing had a lot of problems with it this volume, especially since we were basically promised a lot of fights here and there throughout the volume, but almost never got them.
I do have to agree. There were some fights I were actually looking forward to. Some of them were there, some of them weren't. Mostly it was all about the discussions of trusting others that you used to know. And on top of that, if there's even a reason to keep moving on going, if there's a reason to keep moving forward.
I do have to say, though, the fight between Raven and Cinder, I really enjoyed that fight scene. But yes, I will agree, there weren't that too many fights.
Yeah, in all honesty, as much as I love the fights in RWBY, I am very disappointed that we only got 2 real fights this volume, and that was Weiss versus the Queen Lancer, and of course, Raven versus Cinder. Yes, we did have the Battle of Haven, but it wasn't much of a fight. And it could have been done much, much better. Although we did get Blake versus Elia, which was okay. I think one of my biggest problems is that we have too much story this time. Typically, we have a good balance of story and action that sort of keeps both interesting. I think they focused a little too much on story in this volume.
In all honesty, it's not much of story that I kind of saw from this episode. It was more about closure. Because think about it, Ilya still had issues dealing with Blake, knowing the fact that she kept on going against Adam's orders, and she knows that Adam is completely against Blake in all certain ways. But then Blake just wants to take back the White Fang to prove to them that the Faunus does not want to actually fight against humans. So that way they actually gain his recognition and, reputation, so they don't get treated like how it be if, like, how it is with, like, people and sometimes in slavery and that. But when it came to me in this volume, it was about closure. It was about closing the gaps between the points of separation, and on top of that, getting over the hard, trying to understand that even if things get any harder, that there is no reason to turn back because they have each other. It was really all about closure, especially from the last episode, because we already saw how Raven is. She understands that she is a maiden, and on top of the fact that she can also, in the fact that she also has a certain kind of using magic, but the main point is that she would actually be a serious target for Salem. And the thing is that because of that, she fears Salem completely. Yang stood up for her own volition and keep pointing out that even though she doesn't know anything about Raven at all, she's still standing to the point, even if she's scared. She will still fight knowing that she fears Salem. She will keep going, she'll keep moving forward even though there will be obstacles in her way. And she keeps pointing out that Raven's just been running and hiding away from her problems, regardless if it has to deal with her family or her tribe. So it's mainly, to me, it was all about closure, talking it out and bringing out the points and saying, "Hey, I may be like you, but at least I'm still going to keep going."
Yeah, that's a good point. One of the things I really have to point out with this volume is that everyone, including myself, had been wanting Weiss to learn how to use her summoning, and it was truly terrific to see her using the summoning. But now that kind of raises a bit of a red flag with her character. I am slightly worried that in future volumes, like what she did in this volume, she might rely too heavily on something like her summoning. And ultimately, that did kind of cost her near the end of the volume.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that, Kendricks. When I first saw the summons, I thought, okay, this could help her in like in a dangerous situation, and just kind of give her a little bit of an edge. But I will agree. I think she may rely too heavenly on her summons just to help her out.
Mm.
Yeah. There is something that kind of bugs me about Blake, though, and is that we only see one of her two swords throughout pretty much the entire volume. We almost never see her sheath sword, which after I noticed that, it did kind of bug me a little bit. Because Blake used to be one of the most diverse fighting characters, and now something that made her so diverse has been kind of taken away. I'm hoping they bring it back in a future volume.
Personally, for me, I still think Blake is one of my second favorite characters. However, what got me interested was the way that she used the rope on the back of her sword, kind of like a whip. I haven't seen that in a while, so that kind of worries me a little bit too.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things about fighting when it came down to this volume was that they focus a lot on the realism of attacks as well as the fantasy. And ultimately, that's just not what RWBY is or what it used to be. It used to be very flashy and very over the top and everything. Even after the unfortunate death of Monty Oum, in Volume 3, the fight scenes were still kind of grand and still had this very big sort of impact whenever you saw them. even in Volume 4, which gave us, Crow versus Tyrion, one of the best battles I've ever seen, you know, you can tell there's a major difference nowadays. A lot of the fights in this volume felt really slow in comparison, except for Raven versus Cinder.
Kendrick, now that you brought this up, about Crow, I always thought he had a good fight scene, which was personally for me, but has anybody other than me realized that he's never actually used his
Scythe?
fight? Yes.
Yeah,
We've only seen his sword and his gun. That's it. Never his scythe.
once. But typically, yes, Crow does use a sword, which I'm hoping that they utilize his scythe in future volumes, as he is told to be a scythe wielder, but he is constantly using a sword in comparison. And I would really love to see Crow's actual skill with a scythe, as he's the one who taught Ruby how to use hers.
I would definitely like to see it too, especially when he transforms into his Raven mode and then back into his human mode and to use the scythe. I would love to see that.
Oh, yes, definitely. Another thing that this volume had was it had a lot of feels and moments. It seemed to focus a lot on those with this volume. With a lot of, touching music, reunions. There was one problem I had with that, though, and is that Blake didn't really reunite with Team RWBY until the second to last episode.
I agree there.
But I am kind of glad that because she took so long getting there and that her goal was really only to fight Adam, Adam is going to, escape. He's going to come back and fight, because the way he was taken down by Blake with just a single punch, it was kind of underwhelming. And, I mean, it was cool, but it was still underwhelming, and it just doesn't feel like the right way to end the fight between Adam and Blake.
Even if we did get a fight scene, it would be pretty hard to maybe follow along. But that's my own personal opinion.
Yeah, I think in future volumes we're going to need to get to see more of the actual original style of combat, because the combat isn't necessarily bad, but it's certainly not as good as it used to be. And that may be from just transferring over to the Maya engine in comparison to Poser.
Dust, do you have anything to say on this?
Well, as I said before, this volume to me was more about closure. Basically trying to fill in the gaps that have been that's been separating all the characters and basically their ties and their connections. The whole point of why Blake took so long just to ever actually go against Adam and then finally be reunited with RWBY and Weiss and Yang is the fact that she wanted to finish it up. She wanted to finish all ties with Adam because she knows that he is the biggest obstacle in his in her life right now. It's the only reason why she can't either go back to Yang or Ruby or Weiss, because he would be the one that's standing in the way trying to cut them down. So she needs to take care of him first. Which I thought it was a good idea for them to have their own personal fight, but instead it shows that even though you have the support of even if though you have your own support of a team, that doesn't mean that everybody else are that doesn't mean that the same type of species that you are will also support you with your type of plan. And everybody was against Adam after they finally understood what it meant when it comes to dealing with those who fight against each other. So I thought it was a good idea and very brilliant the fact that they gave Blake her moment of actually taking down Adam and showing him that how it feels to be betrayed by your own kind. And then when it came to the reunion, well, that just made it even better because it didn't matter about their hardships, because even though Yang was still kind of pissed at Blake for leaving her in the first place, she still accepted her in open arms, and they became back together. That was the best reunion I've ever saw, besides when Ruby saw Weiss and Yang again. That was another good one.
Yeah, I think that the character interactions in the volume are, even though they focus a lot on them, I think that they were perfect when they were executed, especially with the reunion of a lot of the characters. My personal favorite being the moment where they're all sitting together, eating food, reminiscing over the past. That would probably have to be my personal favorite character interaction moment of the volume, as it's the first really light-hearted thing we've had since Volume 3.
I can agree on that. And to me, that kind of reminded me of like what we do with Thanksgiving. Kind of like we reminisce with our family and all that. I think that's what they were trying to do.
Yeah, it's a very touching scene, and a lot of the reunion scenes, like with Weiss and Yang, or with Ruby and Yang, or just all of Team Ruby together, they're all very heart-jerking scenes. They're done very well, and let's be honest. If you didn't cry during those scenes, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, I actually did have a tear. I did actually have some tears when I saw the reunion, but the whole reunion itself, though, around the end of Volume 5 is what really actually started making me crying. Waterfalls. Like, seriously. I was really, really happy when I saw that.
Yeah, I did cry a little bit too. And personally, for me, yeah, I always thought it was because of the music that was playing in the background. That was the most beautiful part about it.
Yeah, that's something that I really did love about this volume is when the music plays, it plays really well. But also, we honestly didn't get that many songs in this volume, like during the actual show. We had the opening, Triumph, but after that, all we really had was This Life Is Mine. Then we had All Things Must Die during the fight with Raven and Cinder, and then All That Matters, which is when Team RWBY reunited, and of course, the credit song, which I believe was called This Time, which is also From Shadows Part 2. Uh, so they didn't really utilize a lot of soundtracks this volume. But one thing I will say is that I did love that we got to know more about Raven, more about the Bronwyn's, their history, how they ended up at Beacon, and even more about the Maidens as well, including the relics.
Speaking about the relic, the last episode mentioned that they have to take the relic back or to a place.
To
Does that
Atlas.
mean, yeah, to Atlas? Does that mean we're gonna be seeing some old characters along with some new ones?
That is genuinely what I am thinking about, because Weiss has just left Atlas as of Volume 4, but now she has to go back. I feel like that's going to lead to a big controversy in Volume 4, and we're going to have to encounter Jacques Schnee, as well as Whitley Schnee, and of course Klein, the butler, which it will be good to see Ironwood as well.
I would love to see Weiss's older sister come back. I'd love to see her again.
Yeah, Winter is a character that I honestly was a little disappointed we didn't get to see her this volume, but at the same time, I'm really hoping we get to see her in the next one. And something I think that they're going to do is they're going to skip the whole traveling thing like they did in Volume 4. But if they do travel, it's probably going to be in the first chapter or so. And I'm hoping we get more focus on Salem's group with Tyrion and everything. Because we do need to see the after effects of losing Cinder.
Yeah, and I would kind of like to see what actually happened to Mercury in the gang. I kind of would like to see that.
Yeah. And personally, regarding Cinder, I don't think that she is dead, as she basically got hit with the same thing that Raven got hit with, but Raven broke out of it. So I don't believe that, Cinder is dead. If anything, I think she probably fell down for a while and maybe the ice didn't break or whatever.
I don't know. A lot of people have been speculating that she really is gone this time.
Speculation will only get us so far. In my personal opinion, when it comes down to a character death, unless I see a body, I don't personally believe that that character is dead, even if I see them fall to their supposed death.
True.
Yeah.
And I just remembered that Cinder still has a maintenance power inside of her. Even
yeah.
if she died, wouldn't that power be transferred to somebody else?
Yes, either the last person in her thoughts or someone at random.
So here's a scary thought. If Cinder would have died and the power of the maiden would have been transferred, who would have been the last person in her thought?
If I had to guess, personally, it would be either Raven, because she is the one who killed her, or Cinder. I mean, not Cinder, but Emerald, considering she is probably the closest person to Cinder.
I kind of have a theory that it might be Ruby because Cinder really wanted to go after Ruby because of what happened to her eye and her arm.
This is true, but Ruby has her Silver Maiden or Silver-Eyed Warrior powers, so I don't think that they'll end up giving her the Maiden powers as well.
Well, she doesn't actually know how to activate the silver eyes like her mom did.
This is true, and also we still know nothing about Team Stark, which I'm really hoping that they give us something in future volumes, because it's such a big fan requested thing to learn more about Team Stark.
I still want to know what Ruby's mom's weapon was, because that picture, it didn't show what the weapon was. All we saw was the back of her head, and that was it.
Yeah. I had something in my head just a second ago. um, Regarding Raven's character, though, it was interesting to see more about her, to meet the tribe, to uh, get as far into her character as we had. Vernal was an interesting character, and a part of me at first had this little suspicion in my head that she wasn't the Spring Maiden. And that was actually pretty clever of Raven to have a scapegoat to play the part of Maiden so that no one would come after Raven.
I kind of see your point there. Does you want to interact on this?
Well, in all honesty, it was very clever for Raven to ever actually point out that, yeah, making Renal a fake actual maiden. But then you start realizing, why hasn't she shown any points of ever using any powers, any at all? That makes you question. And it's just, in all honesty, it's sad to see her that after around the end of Volume 5 that she had to go, that she was dead, that she died, just to help out Raven to defeat Cinder. And yes, I do not believe Cinder's not dead either. I mean, first of all, she has a grudge against Ruby, and since the fact is that Raven has also gotten hit by that same spell, I'm pretty sure she's still alive because she's going to get she wants her revenge against Ruby. So there's no way in hell she's just gonna let that go. But yeah, Renal was an interesting character. I agree. Problem is though that she was basically just doing whatever Raven told her to do and just played the part of a fake maiden. And then on top of that, that was kind of a dangerous role because how are you supposed to prove the fact that you're a maiden even if somebody calls you it? And on top of that, you're pretty much a target now for someone who is pretty much all about, well, world domination. And the thing is that I don't know. I don't know if that was a good idea or not. Sure, you saved your bacon, but that means you put somebody else on the hit list. And I don't think that was very good at all. That was just being completely selfish. And then we get to Raven herself. I don't think I've ever seen a character have so much impact on themselves when it came to realizing of what they've been of the reality that they've had to live in, but then the answer that's like right, but then the shocking truth that's right in their face. Because the biggest thing that I pretty much thought was a huge impact to me in Volume 5 was literally the talk between Raven and Yang, because there was already discussions that people were watching after they saw the thumbnail for the last episode. They're like, "Oh my God, Yang and Raven are actually gonna fight! Like actually fight?" No, I'm sorry to say, but I do not think they're here to really fight because as much as I know how much the fighting potential between Yang and Raven is, I still think they actually still have some actual, you know, sympathetic feelings for them knowing that they're family. But it's just with Raven, she needs to come to the fact that yeah, now that you're a maiden, you really are a target now. You can't be running away. If you do, you're going to involve everybody else and they're going to get hurt. Even though you've been trying to protect yourself and your tribe, very soon that you're going to be targeted by everybody and it's just going to all end up going terribly, terribly wrong. So, for me to say, yeah, Cinder's now dead to me. That's just my opinion. And to me, Raven's character, I really actually didn't care at first because I thought she was an ice cold and heartless woman who only cared about herself and her tribe. But around the last episode, that impact, that closure, that talk between her and Yang, it made me actually care about Raven because it seemed like she actually still has feelings, even though throughout the rest of the series it pretty much showed that she was just heart-wholeded and felt like she had no heart or soul. But apparently she still does. So I'm hoping we get to see her in the next volume when Ruby's gang goes up to Atlas to go to the next just to go to see if they can get the next relic. And hopefully she ends up actually trying to become closer to them instead of just you know, putting distance between her and her family because of Salem.
Yeah, it's nice. A very big hope that I have for future volumes is that Ruby will learn how to use her silver eyes, at least to an extent. I don't want her to become severely overpowered because I want the final battle to be her utilizing the silver eyes to her fullest potential, which I think would be a very good way to end the final battle. But at the same time, we don't know anyone aside from maybe Osmond who knows how the silver eyes work, unless Crow learned from Summer how the silver eyes worked.
Speaking about the silver eyes, did anybody other than me realize that after after when Ruby only sees somebody die, does her silver eyes actually like kick on? I mean, it's kind of like a dramatic thing.
The silver eyes may be sort of triggered at first by traumatic events such as the death of a character or um, perhaps the potential danger that comes in with that. So
True.
we really don't even know that much about the Silver-Eyed Warriors, which is something I hope they delve more into. And I kind of personally hope that they bring back World of Remnants because that was a good way of getting exposition out to people so that you don't compromise the story. And I think that that's something that really took away from Volume 5 is that the World of Remnant was gone. And ultimately, anything we needed that we had to learn about the series, now we had to learn about the show, and that kind of sacrificed some of the runtime that it had.
Guys, I gotta jump out for a few minutes. I got an emergency call to take. I'm sorry.
Okay. So personally, if I had to rank this particular volume, it's personally my least favorite. And I'm not saying that to be disrespectful to anyone who says, "Oh, this was the best volume. It was their favorite volume." I like the volume, but it is kind of my least favorite.
I can understand why. I mean, it's kind of underwhelming due to the fact that it was supposed to have some tension with story and fight and the fights, but unfortunately, all we got were mostly was just about character. Well, mostly it was about closure, character development, and reunions. That's mainly what it was about. Because we were closing the gaps on their problems. They're joining together, knowing that there's more ahead. There's more trouble ahead of them, and on top of that, that things are just going to get things are about to start getting very more difficult for their journey to get the relics.
Yeah, I think what really puts this volume so low on my list is that in the best way of describing it, it feels like everything happened, but at the same time, nothing happened at all. We know that the entire volume is 2 months of time, and that is entirely too much time passing by in
Apologize on
just
that.
yeah. But
Sorry.
it's okay. But as I was saying, Volume 5 really suffers from having only like 2 months in its story. We know that the story takes 2 months of time in the RWBY universe, but it feels like it almost happens in like just a couple of days, which I think is a big downside for this volume.
I would have to agree with you there, Kendricks. It does seem pretty. It does seem pretty rushed, especially with the time.
Yeah, like if you go back to the first 3 volumes, we know that it was around the end of summer when RWBY like started its year of school, and at the very least, it was before October 31st when Volume 3 ended with like the fall of Beacon, because it's been confirmed that RWBY's birthday is October 31st, and she was still 15 during the tournament. So by the end of the volume, when everything had turned to winter, she was 16, and it feels like the story actually it was paced out nicely. It didn't feel like everything was being rushed. I feel like that was the big problem with Volume 5.
I agree. I mean, it feels like we just got started with Volume 5 and now it's over. I feel like they literally did rush this volume too quickly.
And that's not
Yeah.
to go
Sorry.
ahead.
Go
Go.
ahead.
I was just saying that's not to say it's bad, but it's just not very well paced. But as you were going to say, Bonnie?
I was gonna say, yeah. I hope in season 6 that they actually take their time with the time on the episodes and kind of slow down the pacing. Like, we still need to have a lot more questions to be answered, especially when it comes to Weiss and her family.
Yeah, which I'm really hoping that we actually do get a sort of interaction between Weiss and her family in the next volume, because now that we're going to Atlas, it seems like the perfect time to bring in the rest of the Schnee family, including Weiss's mother, as we didn't get to see her in Volume 4, but it was alluded that she is still around.
Yeah, personally, I would have loved to see how Weiss and her mom either look or even what the voice actor would be for Weiss's mother.
Well, we did see a picture of Weiss's mother in Volume 4, but unfortunately we never actually got to see her in the Maya engine or even hear from her. And I think one of the things I'm hoping for the most in future volumes is a definite upgrade in the fighting, because I love the fights in RWBY. They're one of the things that sold me on this show, but there's just been a major downgrade since Volume 3. And I still like the fights in Volume 4. And Volume 5 had the amazing Cinder and Raven battle. But for the most part, I feel like the battles just aren't as, for lack of a better word, spectacular as they used to be.
Personally, for me, for future volumes, I kind of want to see how they incorporated more of the dust elements, because that was what got me interested. Like, how how does dust actually come together? Like, what goes through making it? I mean, we know it's basically the elements, but still, how is it made?
Hmm.
Yeah, the world of Remnant never really touched up on that too well. But we do know that it is a sort of natural resource. It just kind of grows and is part of the planet. And I do want to see more applications with dust, like, say, dust-embedded clothing or dust-embedded tattoos, more dust-based weapons. Which, Yang, she has the fire dust in her shotgun gauntlets and her Ember Silica. And Weiss, of course, is a master of using dust with her Mirrored Master. But for the most part, we almost never see anyone using dust anymore.
And not just the dust that's in their weapons. I'm also thinking about the crystal dust as well. That I would love to see, because we only saw one crystal dust being used, and that was with Torchwick back in season 1. I want to see more of the crystal dust being used.
Well, we did also see it with Hazel, as he did inject it into his arms, giving him powers over lightning and, of course, fire.
True.
And one thing that I gotta say about the villains for this volume is that I loved Adam's, like, extremist behavior in this volume, but at the same time, it kind of takes away from the calm, cool, collected attitude that he had in previous volumes, which is kind of both a pro and con.
What do you mean?
I'm sorry?
No, I'm just trying to understand, like, what do you mean by
Well,
the villains? Like, do you want to see more of
I
who they
do.
are and how they became a part of this?
Yeah, I want to see more of the villains. I want to see, more of their, you know, for lack of a better word, nefarious doings. Um, because that's one of the most interesting things about stories nowadays, is that you want to know more about the villains. Uh, I'm very interested to see more about Adam, especially now that he's completely on the run. Uh, Hazel is going to have to deal with the fact that he failed to defeat Ozpin, get the relic, and of course is now going to have to say that to Salem. And we see what happens when you fail Salem, as what happened with Lionheart at the end of the volume. where he was quite clearly killed.
Yes. Speaking about Lionheart, that device that they used to communicate, did they ever say what the name was? I must have missed it.
On screen, no, but if you take a look at some of the credits, it says that it is a Seer Grim, which is kind of like Skype for Grim.
Yeah, nice way to call it.
Yeah.
Skype for Grim.
But really, who uses Skype anymore?
Yeah. One thing is for sure, though, we won't be seeing that guy anymore.
Yeah. Unless maybe Salem had the power to turn him into a Grim, but that's just a wild throwaway theory that I'm not really going to get into in this discussion. I'm also very interested to see what they're going to do with Tyrion in future volumes, because he lost his tail in Volume 4, and Watts apparently can make him a new one, so I'm wondering, will he have like a grim tail, kind of like what Cinder did with her arm, or will it be kind of an auto-male tail, like with Raven's, I mean, not Raven, but Yang's arm?
Well, I was actually thinking more of an artificial tail that still has his poison inside of him, but it kind of could eject it instead of just going through the skin. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I can see it happening like that. But overall, like, if I had to say with this volume, while you were off screen, Bonnie, I said this, that it's actually personally my least favorite volume. And that's just because, like, the pacing isn't very good, and I just feel like everything happened, but nothing happened at the same time. Because I have a lot of moments in this volume that I really did love, but overall, I just didn't get the same kind of feeling that I got from previous volumes in terms of actual progression. Because it did feel like we got somewhere, but it doesn't feel like we actually made the journey to get where we got, if that makes any sense.
I just thought some of the episodes had way too much padding and it kind of slowed the episode down. But
Oh, yeah.
that's my own opinion.
Dust?
For my opinion on this volume, it's more like it was in the middle. I'm not going to say it was my least. I'm not going to say it was my best. I mean, in all opinion, my least favorite was Volume 3. All because of the major impacts of all the points of what happened, during Volume 3. The point about this volume, as I've said before, it was all about the closure. I liked that. That was the biggest thing that I loved about this volume, because it was about finishing, it was about pretty much bridging up the gaps between everybody, because everybody had a certain problem they had to finish. Yang had to finish up a problem with dealing the fact that Blake abandoned them. Weiss had to deal with the problem of trying to actually separate herself from the family and try to feel like she's useful instead of just, a rich daughter. Ruby wanted to try to create a better way of getting stronger so that way she doesn't have to lose anybody. And Blake ended up trying to fix her problems with Adam because that was the only problem in her life right now, because he was an obstacle. He wanted to make her life a living hell, which is why it was even worse when she found out that Alia was still working with the White Fang in that point. Because if she was, then that means she would have to go against her, and she still has feelings for her as a friend. So, with all due respect, even though this isn't my favorite, and I'm not calling it my least, this is like in the middle, like a mediocre level of what I think this volume is. It's okay, but it's not the best, nor is it the worst. It's just it had more points of bringing people together, more than to just bring out more than actually more than of the story it needs, because they did feel like it rushed. I did feel like it rushed a little bit, because I remember when I first saw the first episode in a premiere at a theater, and when I saw it, I was very happy that we were continuing, and then now that we're done, it just feels like we've rushed this entire volume so quickly. I feel like the series literally just came back after like a couple of weeks ago, but no, it's been like about it's been like a couple of months, and yet we're already done.
It's
So it
been
just
about
kind of
4
makes me
months.
shocked to see how fast it went.
Yeah, it's been about 4 months since the volume started almost, and overall, at the end of the day, I will go back and rewatch this volume, but definitely not as much as I've rewatched the others. And it's not because I don't like it. I do like it. It's just like it is a bit of the mediocre for me. And Volume 3 was personally my least favorite for me. Not because of the impacts of the story, but because I'm not a big fan of tournament style stuff when it comes down to stories. So that really kind of turned me off for a lot of Volume 3.
Personally, for me, I always say the first volume is the one that starts it all, and that's where my favorite came in. It's like the first volume, and we see everybody's abilities, what they can do, how they react. But for this volume, for volume 5, I thought, okay, so we're getting a little bit more. We we finally, as I said before, we finally got to know what John's semblance is, and on top of everything else, we did get to have more of the backstory with most of the characters. But like I said, this volume to me, I'll agree on Dust. It's okay, but it's not my favorite. I'll agree on that.
All right. I guess that's all we really have to talk about for the volume. I don't really have much else to say about it in comparison. What about you two? Any final thoughts?
Well, all I wanted to say is that the expectations for the next volume I want to hear about is more details about Ruby Silver Eyes, Raven trying to communicate better with her family so then she won't feel afraid. And on top of that, how are we going to see between the conversation from Weiss and, well, the rest of the Shi family?
Mm, for me, I hope to see more. Well, I hope to see more of communication with Weiss's family. I definitely do want to see why Raven and Crow are like. Why does Raven want to kind of get into a fight with her younger brother Crow? Like, what's wrong with it? But I think I can probably ask my little sister on that. She's more into the Ruby theories than I am.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is a nice discussion. It lasted for about as long as I wanted it to, and how, you know, uh, or it lasted as long as I thought it was going to, which was fairly good. I guess there just wasn't as much to talk about in this volume as there were in previous. But thank you guys on YouTube so much for watching. Once again, that's Bonnie and DTD Dust to Dust. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, and we'll catch you all later.